Intro. Space is everywhere, technically, and we're floating in space on Earth. It's very, very interesting, but there's a lot of things to know about it, but we can really look at the basics now, not everything. The atmosphere on Earth has many layers, we all really know this, but the true challenge is if you can name them without looking. Go on, try it. I dare you. Time's up. Maybe you were able to do it. If you could, you're ahead of the curve, specifically the mesosphere. Anyways, I don't know what specific topics people would be interested in, so let's just cover them all. Skip to whatever part you actually want to hear. We start smaller, but if you were to go in a rocket and pass the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere, you reach outer space. Wow, now you're up there with so many options on where you could go. Of course, locally it's a different story really. You have a few options, but many of them are inhabitable or even not possible to stand on. Let's say hypothetically, you don't need a suit and you're like invincible in the show or whatever, so you can go anywhere. It's all about where would you go. Let's start from the center and move outward, since that's the only right thing to do. Now, first of all, you can't really go to the sun because in layman's terms, it's too hot. So nobody will be going there, don't think about it. But in terms of Mercury, that would be a better option. You're not able to live here unless you can absorb heat very well, considering Mercury is also smaller than Earth and also 167 degrees Celsius for temperature. That's pretty hot. That would be about 333 Fahrenheit for the imperial units. You know, not ideal for living, but you can make it work. As for Venus, yeah, not looking good either. Average temperature is 464 degrees Celsius or 867 degrees Fahrenheit. It's the hottest planet in our solar system, really because it has the same thing Earth has, but on a larger scale. That being the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the effect that happens when gases trap heat inside of a planet. Now in regulation this can be good. But in the case of Venus, it is not ideal only because the atmosphere is so much denser than Earth. That's why it's so hot. It's because the greenhouse effect is so much on Venus compared to here. Honestly, it would be kind of hard to live on Venus. Anyways, onto Earth. Psych, I'm just kidding. We already know about Earth, but we can talk about the moon. We only get one moon, I guess, because of the bare minimum, but luckily we're the first planet in the solar system to have a moon, so that it's very special. You should all know the way the moon phases work, as well as the tides, but just in case you don't, all you need to know is that the full moon is higher tides and the new moon isn't. Not too much to know, but also a fun fact is that the US is still the only country to have landed a man on the moon, but 5 countries have done soft landings on the moon. Those being the Soviet Union, US, China, Japan, and India. Now a soft landing is different from actually putting a man on the moon. A soft landing is when they send a device or some tech there instead. It takes a lot of CO2 emissions to get to the moon, so it's unlikely there'll ever be a lunar colony or anything similar to that. It would be too many rockets and too many materials to actually have to make it viable. But also the moon would probably be too cold for this anyways. But it's just kind of a good thing that it's just a science fiction idea. Anyways, on the Mars, the other place people really want to colonize for some reason. Don't know why, it's so far away, and also it would be a lot of work to terraform it. Considering the long distance, the 2 moons, and the red landscape, it doesn't seem very economical to build anything there. If the Mars rover showed us anything to actually see, it's that we should avoid building there. But, like that earlier point, did you know Mars had 2 moons? Well, it does. That's double what Earth has. The moons are twins named Phobos and Deimos. Probably butchered those. But they both sound like graphing calculators. But they aren't. They also aren't as big as our moon, so quality over quantity, really. It's a good thing these moons aren't colonizable, since we would also use them as a target for that too, if we were on Mars. Now onto the biggest planet in our solar system, Jupiter. You know, the iconic planet that's in the middle. Also the one for consideration for coolest name, to be honest. It has 95 moons, which is a lot, but not the most, so second place to it for that. Europa is the best one out of the moons, just because of the name. Also, this is where life was totally found, according to, I think, a Facebook post. You know, you can always trust those. You know, it's gotta be true if it's on Facebook. But anyways, Europa has been an interesting moon to look at for life. It's similar to Titan, where life could be on it somehow, but we don't know yet. It makes sense fully because if you look at it, it has the formulas for some life in some of the spots. An ocean similar to ours under an icy surface, which would help life survive, like a little. But because of radiation that comes from Jupiter, it doesn't seem too good for life, unless you want something like Chernobyl. That also means Jupiter isn't a planet you could live on, which makes a little sense because, it's a gas giant. There's no land on there to live on. It's all gas that you can't stand on, and also radiation exists on the planet, so not looking good for colonization. Before we get on with the planet showcase, we can't forget the asteroid belt that's in between Mars and Jupiter. They call it an asteroid belt, but that's for a reason. It's because of how it literally is just a belt that basically keeps Mars and the rest of the planets inside it, and acts like a separation barrier for the planets. You can get through it, but it's just very tough to do that. It's full of asteroids and meteors that are constantly rotating around the sun. Also watch out, these rocks move at different speeds, so they will and do hit each other a lot. This is gonna cause them to go out of place and all over the place, so watch out for that if you're ever traveling through this part of space. You don't want you or your rocket to get hit and then explode or something. But anyways, assuming you make it through there, and Jupiter bores you for some reason, you still can see the iconic ring of Saturn. Saturn being the second largest planet, but it makes up by having the most amount of moons, 274 to be exact, which is a lot more than Jupiter. So get destroyed, I guess. Loser, wrecked. But anyways, it's about quality over quantity. That's all that matters. Titan has a very similar structure to Europa, where the ocean it has is below the surface, so life could exist on it, but not very likely, because it's still too cold right now. But at least the radiation belts on Saturn are way weaker than those on Jupiter. Every planet has radiation belts, but they are much stronger on gas giants. They are rings around the planet of captured particles in space. But anyways, now to Saturn, which has a different type of ring. These are probably from debris and other things that eventually make their way to Saturn, since Saturn has a stronger gravity than Earth. It is probably harder to leave its atmosphere. Imagine this, right? You're a rock floating in space, and then all of a sudden, this vacuum takes you into it. Kind of like when you jump, you were forced down, but from space. You, as the rock, are now just circling around Saturn in a ring-shaped pattern. But luckily, you can see comets if you look close enough, considering that comets are also nearby this area as well. You know, those things you see in the sky. They really are this far away. Crazy to really see it, the distance it is from Earth. Now moving on to Uranus, which is the planet with the funny name, but sadly, it's pronounced Uranus and not Uranus. But other than that, the planet has a smaller ring. It's like Saturn, but different because this one is vertical as well. It doesn't have the heft to it that the other ring has. They are vertical because of the tilt of the planet. The tilt of the planet is basically just going to Photoshop and rotating the image 45 degrees, and bam, you have a planet. But now blue because of methane gas. That's right, methane gas in this atmosphere. It absorbs the red parts of the light that touches it, which then leads to the cool and infamous blue color we now know. Also, watch out for the atmospheric pressure on Uranus. It's about 100 times stronger than what's on Earth. But now let's look at the other blue planet, Neptune. The last official planet right now, which is sad because there used to be 9. But now it's down to 8. Neptune is blue mainly because of the same reason that Uranus is, and that it's because of the elements reflecting the sunlight back to it. Other than the methane gas in the atmosphere, Neptune also has a lot of helium and hydrogen in its atmosphere. So, if you need to fill a balloon, you'll be all set. Life isn't even a thought on this planet since it is too far away from the sun. It's not getting certified Rotten Tomatoes fresh, IMDb score in the top 250s, nothing. But it's also not getting rough heat to be on it. So, those are all the official planets, but we still have the fun part of this, the former planets in the solar system. First, we have the fine woman that is Pluto, the dwarf planet. It was founded in 1930 and then became not a planet in 2006. Of course, it's because it's a dwarf planet. This is clearly discrimination against dwarf planets. Where's the ADL when you need them? But wait, there's another dwarf planet, aka the Mistake. Eris, the 10th planet for a little bit of time. It was discovered in 2005, but the council didn't like the fact that there were now 10 planets. They needed to gatekeep the classification planet, so they held their little town meeting and decided that dwarf planets are no longer planets. This also got rid of Pluto from being a planet, so we can all thank Eris for doing that to us. This decision was of course made in 2006, because I guess that meeting took a while or something, but now there aren't 10 or 9 planets anymore. But people do like to say that Pluto was a former planet, just like how many people say X, formerly Twitter. Now that the solar system is done, we can see other planets outside the solar system, usually called exoplanets. Don't worry though, these are usually light years away from us, so they're pretty unreachable. Now I will not talk about every exoplanet, because if I did, this video would be more than a day long. Instead, for this section, it's just going to be about the habitable ones, since those are the more important ones. But first, we have to talk about how a planet can be habitable. That comes with the habitable zone of the star that it orbits around. The habitable zone is a certain zone away from the star or light or whatever gives the planet heat, where the planet is getting enough heat, which means not too little, not too much. Kind of like Goldilocks. It's shaped like a ring around the star, depending on the level that it's at. The lucky ring that usually has 1 or 2 planets in it at a time. Ours is Earth and Mars, some people like to say. Now onto the habitable planets that we know about. They are all in the same red dwarf star system called the Kepler region. Yes, like the K-pop band, if you know who they are. The specific planets are Kepler-62f, Kepler-186f, and Kepler-442b. These are all really close. How close, you may be wondering? Well, just 1200, 490, and 1149 light years away for each of them, so just a little road trip. Another planet that seems to be somewhat habitable is Proxima Centauri b. Once it warms up a little, because right now its average temperature is about -39 Celsius or -38 Fahrenheit. So a little cold across the whole planet, but maybe it'll warm up eventually. It is the closest one, being 4.2 light years away. Those are the best bets for habitable planets, but there are probably many more. But we don't worry about those right now. It makes you wonder how far away aliens are if they exist. Of course, now all we see is on Facebook, so look, there if you want some primary sources, but now there's a lot more about space that's important. The sun is a star, and stars usually have a Pokemon evolution line on how they evolve. Referring to the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram for stars, we see 2 evolution lines depending on the star mass. For low-mass stars, they only go to red giants to start off with, but then go to nebulas, which are basically mini versions of supernovas. Just the average thing to do. They got mad, I guess, but then they go to white dwarf stars. Then they might be gone after that, so don't get attached to the white dwarf, I guess, since they'll be gone in a few billion years. Kind of like uranium-235. Now for the big stars, the high mass ones after they come out of the stellar cloud. They go to red supergiants and then a supernova, which is a big explosion that you might be able to see when one happens, light years away. Then they have two options, exactly like Pokemon, on what to do next. One of them is becoming a neutron star, which is a really dense core of a star. Then the other option, not too important, is just a black hole. That's the best thing they can do. It's kind of like explosion in Pokemon, where you take out others outwith you. But then either way, it's done and over with. So, sad for the star's evolution, even though stars usually last about 10 billion years or so. Just a little longer than a human life. Now we move on to the rocks we see in the skies sometimes, and the things we always fear about hitting Earth. That being the comets and asteroids, because NASA says there may be one hitting us in 2032. But that's a long time from now, so no need to worry about it right now, since the margin has constantly been changing, but there are a lot more things to focus on. One of the important asteroids in history is the one 65 million years ago, the iconic one, the dinosaur killer one. It's 150 kilometers in diameter, which is 93 miles, so about the same speed most speed demons drive on the highway in an hour. Any object that size would eliminate at least 5 different objects, but this one got the ace move since it got a whole species eliminated. Asteroids usually just miss Earth because the easiest way to imagine it is like a bowling ball that only stops when it hits a pin. And in this case, the pins are planets. Now you may be wondering, how does it even start rolling? It starts the process of going into space by either being brought into different orbital paths or staying on the asteroid belt, like the one in our solar system. They orbit different objects like the sun and or other nearby gravitational fields, and if they miss, the speed just takes them on the path where they were going originally. This is also because of how movement works in space. That way of moving being that you were forced in the direction you were going in until you hit an object or were pulled back. But it's usually the opposite way of whatever way you put the force towards, so watch out for that. But other than this, it's the same logic used as comets, but at a further distance away. They move similarly, but are different in how they're made. A comet is more icy and dusty compared to an asteroid, which is just made up of rocks. Comets also orbit the sun and stars, which is how you can see them every insert time amount here. The most famous one probably has to be Halley's Comet, or Halley's Comet, however you say it, which comes up around every 72 to 80 years. That's a lot more, but for that, you can just see it if you want to know more comets and stuff. Before the video ends, just wanted to say that you can buy your own stars in the universe and name it whatever you want. It's kind of just out there if you feel like it. Usually, rates depend, but I never did this, and I don't know what the prices are, so I don't even know the site name. But I know you can do this, but you would have to find out how on your own, or just by Googling it. But other than that, space is pretty interesting, right? Yeah, it is too bad we won't be able to see all of it. If you like space stuff or more, please, LSC, like, comment, and subscribe. Pretty please.